Well, the highly anticipated release of the Epstein files has left many disappointed after only some were released with multiple redactions across them. The DOJ were required to make all materials public by Friday. Survivors are concerned the incomplete information lacking context will only fuel conspiracy theories.
A deadline passed, files appeared, and the questions only multiplied. All right, folks, let's slow this down and walk through what we actually know. This story isn't about rumors. It's about a law, a deadline, and what happened after that deadline arrived. Over the past several days, the release of records tied to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation has sparked sharp reactions from survivors, members of Congress, and the Department of Justice itself. In this breakdown, folks, you're going to see three things side by side. First, the expectations that were set when Congress passed a transparency law. Then, the reality of what was released. And finally, the receipts, statements, timelines, and documents that are now being compared against one another. You'll also hear how the public is reacting without being told what to think. And if you appreciate calm breakdowns that let facts speak for themselves, folks, subscribe to Breaking Supporters. Let's start with expectations, folks. Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act with overwhelming bipartisan support. The law required the Department of Justice to release its unclassified records related to Jeffrey Epstein, his accomplices, and alleged enablers by December 19th, with narrow exceptions for things like survivor identities, classified material, or active investigations. The expectation was clarity. Officials had previously said the files would be released. The law set a firm deadline, and survivors expected access to records connected to their own cases. The promise, at least on paper, was straightforward, full disclosure within the bounds of the law. That was the expectation, folks. Now let's talk about what actually happened. On and after the deadline, the DOJ released some materials, but not all at once. Large portions were heavily redacted. Entire pages were blacked out. And officials acknowledged that hundreds of thousands of pages remain unreleased. That was the expectation, folks. This is the reality. Survivors say they received only a fraction of what the law required. Some documents were so heavily redacted that they were unreadable. At the same time, survivors say other documents failed to properly redact victim identities, causing harm the law was meant to prevent. Instead of closure, the release produced new disputes about compliance, consistency, and transparency. Now let's get into.
For some survivors and their families, weeks after Congress forced the turnover of DOJ documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, that triumph tempered now with skepticism and disappointment.
I would say it's a mixed bag of emotions right now.
Sky Roberts is the brother of Virginia Roberts Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent accusers. She died by suicide in April.
How do you think your sister would see this moment?
She'd be really proud of her survivor sisters, but she would know there's so much more to go.
The DOJ acknowledging it's released only some of the Epstein documents in its possession, saying it's reviewing material to protect victims. But one survivors advocacy group today calling the limited release a step backward for transparency and accountability. Among the documents that have emerged, this FBI report dated September 1996, detailing a complaint about child pornography.
Did you know immediately when you saw that document, Annie, what it was?
Yes, it was very clear.
Annie Farmer's sister, Maria, filed that never-before-seen complaint, which says Epstein stole underage photos of her sisters, then threatened to burn her house down if she told anyone. For Farmer and others, still many questions left.
I think that piece of paper highlights the fact that there were huge mistakes made by the government.
I think we still have a big fight ahead of us. We understand that, and we won't stop. We won't stop until true justice is actually served.
Now let's get into the receipts, folks, timelines and statements, not conclusions. The law set a clear deadline and did not authorize delayed disclosure. Survivors released a public statement on December 22nd saying the DOJ missed that deadline and withheld large categories of documents without explanation. They noted that financial records were not released. Grand jury materials approved by a federal judge were fully blacked out. 119 pages were entirely redacted rather than selectively. Survivors were not given guidance on how to find records relevant to their own cases. The statement also says there has been no explanation for why hundreds of thousands of pages remain undisclosed. Separately, earlier public statements are now being revisited. The FBI previously said there were no additional files to release. Senior officials had said the files were ready. Later disclosures showed far more material existed.
We have some important news right now. Epstein survivors are calling out this Department of Justice, and while the DOJ is lying, Epstein survivors released a statement this morning that I covered, which said explicitly two things. Number one, the Department of Justice failed to redact all victim information and names, outing survivors. Number two, the statement said that the DOJ has had no communication with survivors. They don't know how to get files even with their own names in them. And they're demanding congressional action. This comes just one day after Pam Bondi and Todd Bland said that they would meet any survivors, that they have an open door policy, essentially. All of that is a lie, because these survivors don't know how to get in contact with Justice Department officials, and there is no trust between the survivors and Justice Department officials. All of that trust has gone away with the way this DOJ has decided to release.
Those statements were made months apart, and now they're being compared side by side. Again, folks, that's not commentary. That's timing. Public reaction has been intense and divided. Some commenters describe the situation as a historic failure of transparency, repeatedly comparing it to past political scandals. Others expressed disbelief at how the release was handled, questioning how such a high-profile case could appear so disorganized. Several comments focus on accountability, calling for investigations or consequences for officials involved. Others zero in on the contrast between promises of transparency and the outcome, using sarcasm to express skepticism. There are also comments urging continued scrutiny, emphasizing the importance of sustained attention rather than moving on to the next headline. Notably, reactions range from anger to irony to exhaustion, reflecting a public that isn't unified in conclusions, but is clearly engaged. So let me ask you folks, what should transparency look like when Congress sets a hard deadline? How should agencies balance survivor protection with public accountability? And what role should Congress play if a law appears to be only partially followed? Share your thoughts below. Folks, not slogans, just reasoning. Folks, this story is still unfolding. More documents may be released. More explanations may come. And Congress may decide whether oversight goes further. Right now, what we have is a comparison between expectations set by law, the reality of what was released, and the receipts people are lining up to examine. No verdicts here. No sides taken. Here on Breaking Supporters, folks, we track what people expect and what actually happens. If you want continued updates built on timelines, documents, and public reaction, subscribe, and we'll keep following the facts.